Hello, everyone. Welcome to the unfiltered sort of variant of the Unofficial Game Pass Podcast. We are again looking at the medium. If you want a spoiler-free sort of review and discussion about this game, you can find that linked below. We had a very good discussion in the last episode, and I think it's almost worth listening to because we'll probably reference bits from that episode and bounce off what we talked about previously. But saying that, I'm here again with Connor. So Connor, do you want to kind of start us off here? Maybe we talk about the story a little bit, kind of what we liked about it, what we didn't like.
Yeah, I'll start us off. So you start off at your foster father's funeral parlor, who has recently he's recently passed away, and you're basically saying goodbye to him. And that's where you first experience the spirit world, and you actually say goodbye to your Marianne says goodbye to her foster father in the spirit world. He's, a lost soul that needs to be put to rest, and how she does that is she says the spirit's name and she consoles them. And the spirits, as they appear to us, wear these porcelain masks, and it starts off with that very troubling scene for her. And then she gets a phone call from who we later learn is Thomas, who is her real father, we later learn. And this, now I'm going to mention something, Aldrin, and I'm going to get straight to it. At the beginning, did you go into the left bit of the Neva Resort and did you look out the window?
The left bit of the Neva Resort and look out the window? No, why?
Right, when you enter the Neva Resort and you have to go left, right?
Yeah, into the foyer.
Did you look out the window?
No, why? What's out the window?
There's like a zombie out the window.
Is there? No, you're having me on. There's not, is there?
No, okay. If you look on YouTube, go look up on YouTube. You look out the window, and there's like a car, and you walk along that road, not far on from that, and there's like some disheveled body. It doesn't look like they've got any hair. Like the skin looks kind of mottled, and they're kind of shuffling along like a zombie up the road.
Okay. God, oh, I see it. What the? I didn't even notice this at the first time.
Now, I have questions.
What is it? Who is it? Like, that's what I'm gonna know.
Right. See, when I was playing the story, I was thinking, so this is definitely going to be Lily. This is definitely going to be Lily. This is her, and I was expecting at the end when you meet her on the edge of the lake that, you see her with her hair and everything. And then, I thought the camera was going to do that thing. It goes over Marianne's shoulder and then you see the real her where she's burnt and there's no hair. I thought it was absolutely going to do that and she was going to be the zombie looking figure from the beginning, but it didn't. So now this is all supposition, but that leaves me with two choices. Either that was Francis, the groundskeeper, who was in the process of dying, who you see his corpse later.
Yeah.
Or, now this is the real question at the end of the game, which is, where is Thomas? Or in some way that was Thomas who had been drained from the entity using his body.
Yeah. It's a weird one. I think it's definitely, I don't know if maybe I just kind of didn't notice it. Is it very much like, it's difficult to miss?
Now, there's this one other point. There's a very prominent jump scare, and I recorded it on my Xbox. Do you remember looking through a little peephole?
Oh, don't start! I hate that. So I hate to use language, but I shit bricks like when that happened. Like it was so scary.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was lying in bed at night. I think my girlfriend was asleep. Lights off, headset on, and that happened. And you kind of feel your heart just kind of go backwards through your soul, sort of thing. Yeah, very good jump scare, but the face and the eye, I thought, okay, this is the same person. This is the same creature.
Yeah, that's a fair point actually, because I was like thinking halfway or even late game, I was like, who was that in the bathroom? Like, because that makes no sense. Like that, because at first my head was thinking, was that the maw? Well, no, the maw doesn't have eyes, so like, it was a weird one.
And I suppose that the main spoiler that we're getting to at the end of the game, the post-credits scene, where my interpretation of it is it's the spirit Thomas. He's walking away from Niva, and he picks up the wristwatch.
But if it was the spirit Thomas now, and because very much when you see the end screen, like, you know, the spirit Thomas is portrayed as like very much all dark like tones, you know, all greys, blacks and whatnot. But the Thomas you see at the end has, like, you know, he's got brown shoes on, he's wearing navy jeans. Like, that's why I think it's the actual Thomas, and somehow he's managed to get into the spirit world.
See, that is a very hard question to answer, isn't it? Because here's a few things. If you've read all the notes from Thomas, you'll know that he's written that one side of your personality cannot exist without the other, at least in the case of him and Marianne. So when the spirit Thomas says he can't feel the real Thomas's presence, is that a lie? Because
no, go on.
I didn't immediately trust Spirit Thomas, because throughout the game he's sort of this unreliable figure, although it is revealed later that Thomas changes his theory, and actually he thinks maybe it is just the same person in different worlds after seeing Mary Ann's and how her abilities manifest, and she is the same person in both worlds. But it is clear with Thomas that they are different.
Yeah.
But when we first released Spirit Thomas from the Broken Mirror, I didn't trust him. And I did trust him when he said, "Oh, Thomas always loved you and Lily." I was like, okay, so maybe this is real Thomas. It's just kind of the darker version of himself, and maybe I should trust him. Although seeing that post-credits scene, I'm thinking, okay, if that is Spirit Thomas, and he was supposed to hold off the Maw, he would have been destroyed by the Maw. Something is not right.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely, you know, obviously it's the intention of the creators to, you know, leave it open-ended so that you're asking questions. And I think, you know, we were talking a little bit over Discord, you know, kind of saying, like, you know, you were like, "Oh, did you see the post-credit scene?" I was like, "Yeah, I have, but I just can't remember it." So I went back and watched it, and I was like, how did I forget this, first of all? And then I was like, yeah, this definitely seems like they're opening it up for, you know, DLC, possibly, maybe a second game, you know?
I would personally love to see a DLC where you play as either Thomas, well, Spirit Thomas, I assume, or Thomas trapped in the spirit world.
Yeah, I think
just to answer some of those questions.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think speaking of Spirit Thomas and, you know, the time you inhabit Thomas in the game, this kind of more goes on to, like, I suppose it incorporates story in a little bit, but I found, at least for me, and I'd like to get your opinion on this, I found those were the most enjoyable parts of the game, because you kind of see, you get the dynamic range of the art styles, like when you go into, like, Richard's mind, or you go into Henry's mind, and I think the storytelling is done so well there, and you're kind of presented with this, like, sort of, what would it be, what's the word, like, sort of almost, you know, Cthulhu style Lovecraftian sort of monsters that you see with regards to, you know, because you know, the way you mentioned that there's, like, you know, there's obviously, for a majority of the time, there's, like, at least in the minds of people, there's sort of a child who represents, like, you know, the innocence of that individual, and then there's, like, a monster or creature which represents, like, you know, the worst of that person, and the most pretty much all the times we encounter individuals, or we go into their mind, the monster has you know, overpowered, you know, their nicer, their more innocent half, and there's a lot of things you can get it out of that from the game. I think it kind of, you know, it's a good representation of, you know, when people go to a dark place, almost, you know, like, their good elements kind of huddle away and kind of hide away. Well, apart from Henry's like, sort of, you know, perceived to be good entity is just an asshole. So it's like there's no good side to Henry. That's kind of been, I suppose, you know, conditioned out of him. But no, yeah, there's I So what I'm trying to get at is that, like, I don't know if you enjoyed the Thomas bits more than the Marianne bits. Did you?
I certainly enjoyed the first Thomas Vision. I thought that was fantastic. I really loved, the kind of Psychonauts idea of going inside someone's head. The whole visual imagining of, someone plagued by their own demons, where everyone is an innocent child and the demons that they have built off of their experiences are ruling over them as these kind of Cthulhu-esque monsters. What a powerful statement, and to be represented in art was fantastic. I didn't enjoy Henry's very much, I have to say. I think by the time it got to Henry, I'm thinking, okay, I'm Spirit Thomas in Henry's mind. My children are burning in the house, so I've got to do this with some urgency. Oh, let's just put this film in this reel and find out about Henry's past. Oh, that's quite nice. It's just like, I'm supposed to be rushing through this.
Yeah. But in fairness, you can, and I didn't realize this with the first tape, you can just put the tape in and keep walking and it'll play. So you won't actually miss out on any of the audio there.
Oh, well, I was not aware.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Like, if you were to play a game, like, you'd automatically think, like, well, if I walk away from this, and I think that's sort of a condition of people who kind of play games a lot. Like, it's like, oh, if I walk away from this, I won't be able to hear it, and I'll miss out on some story stuff, and I'll be like, oh, why didn't I know this? And then I'd be like, oh, well, it was told to me, but I didn't bother listening. So,
it's
yeah,
that awful feeling when you're playing Halo 5, and it's like, oh, I want to get all the audio stuff, and I don't want to hear Grunt talk into an audio log. Oh, I have to stand by it for the whole duration. It's like, oh, now I'm dead because I didn't kill that elite a second ago.
Yeah, I do like that they incorporate that, when you're moving away, it still goes to you. That's always been like a pet peeve for me, is like, especially like if you have a headset on and say like you need to turn away for a second and then like the audio kind of gets muffled or something, you're like, well, just let me hear it. Like, I don't want to be standing. I'd like to listen to something, it's particularly when there's elements of gameplay that don't require a large level of concentration in games, and you're just kind of maybe barraging your way through enemies, and it's like, oh yeah, it'd be nice to have something to listen to in the background, but no, I have to stand here and wait until it's finished, and then I'll go do the meaningless combat, and then I'll, just get the worst of both worlds.
Yeah, I honestly hope developers take on board some advice, because I was playing Control, and that's another game where you start a video, you start an audio log, and then you walk away, you think, oh bloody hell, I can't hear it. But what was really funny about that is I started one, walked into a conversation with a character. It's like, oh, the subtitles are overlapping each other. Great. That's not great implementation of audio logs. So, yeah, pet peeve. But no, Henry's. I found the environment. The over toppling cabinets and documents from his life working for the state on these supernatural cases. It was an interesting environment to start off with, but then it very quickly just looked all the same to me. And there are certain points in this game where it's like, okay, I'm crawling along a ledge, this is a video game trope, fine. And the balance beams, it's like, okay, well, this is a video game trope. Oh, but that's interesting because the moor's below. Oh, that's interesting because the dogs jump through it and knock the balance beam, so that's quite tense. But ultimately, far too many balance beams in that section. It's not like I failed a single one. It's like I can keep control of the thumbstick, but I don't know why that's a fun gameplay element. Bit of parkour might have been nicer, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing as well I actually genuinely dislike about games like this, and I guess they incorporate it so like to keep the pacing at a good flow, but the fact that you jog so slowly is, especially as Thomas, I think Thomas actually walks slower than Marianne. And even when you're Marianne, you can put the shield around you when you're going through the spirit moths. Like, if you want to put up your shield as Thomas, you have to stop and start walking instead of being able to jog. And it's just stuff like that always kind of annoys me, because it's like, yes, I get that I have to go through a very simplistic puzzle here, please let me run to it. And it's almost heightened the annoyance of it as well by if you die and then you have to go and walk around all over again to do the same thing.
Yeah, which makes even more absurd the idea that your children are burning and you're kind of at this even slower pace than Marianne, just kind of fumbling along, just like, oh, it's nice scenery.
Yeah.
But
And it's not like they didn't shy away from running in the game as well, because as we mentioned in the last episode, like the pursuit scenes, like, you're blistering pace. Like I want to see a bit of energy from Marianne and Thomas, when I want to run. Like
yeah, exactly. But I think, talking about the balance beams and the ledges there actually reminded me of another gameplay feature, which is the controller vibration and rumbling. I don't know if you noticed this very much, but very early on in the game, I thought, oh, this is a bit much. I'm going to turn the vibration to low instead of high. And then throughout the game, they've tried to use vibrations. Vibrations happen when a phone rings. Almost any interaction Marianne has a rumble put with it, which is like, okay, this is interesting that you're using the rumble in this way, but it feels a bit overkill to me.
Yeah. No, I think generally a lot of people, like, I'm not usually one that's too worried. Like if there's vibration option in a game, I'll usually keep it on unless, like, I need to preserve controller batteries or something. I know there's some people who absolutely despise vibration in games and they turn it off straight away. I don't think anyone's missing out on much if they turn it off. As you said, though, it is a little bit overkill at certain points as well.
Well, I tell you what, the first cutscene, my hands were numb from holding the controller. I was like, I'm definitely putting this on low. But I was just going to praise the Series X controller because even though I think it's exactly pretty much the same as the Xbox One controller, but the way that it vibrates, so you have the kind of normal rumble, but the rumble up near the triggers where it has those are so much more effective, because the main game I've noticed this in is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah.
And when you're sprinting in that game, you can feel the footsteps of your character in the right and left triggers of the controller alternately as he's running. And they're just a little tick in each trigger. And that was so effective when I was playing this game. I was like, oh, if this is what the Series X controller is like, I'm going to love every game. Yeah. Now, I think the little small tick of the trigger vibration was so effective. I haven't really seen other games utilize that as much. But whatever Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order did, if more games could understand how to get that small trigger tick, that's a real, just a variation from the whole thing rumbling.
Yeah, because I definitely noticed the vibration of the triggers as well, and I thought, oh, this is something new. Like this has never happened. Like at least I don't have any memory of it happening in any other games. I haven't touched Fallen Order since it's got its new update, but I'll definitely have to go to look. Let's go back a little bit, because I want to talk a little bit more about the story, and in particular the opening segment with Jack, who is the sort of surrogate, adopted father. And I mentioned this in the previous episode, but like, he's kind of introduced at the beginning, and then you help him get through. And first of all, I'm never a huge fan of, like, having this like big influential character of our main character, die off screen at the beginning or something, or have this big relationship with someone, and then they kind of die in the first like half an hour of the game. Because I get that Marianne, as a character, has a big connection to him, but for me as the player, like, I'm not getting much out of that, if that makes sense. Like, there's not very much, like, there's nothing drawing me to being like, oh no, Jack's dead, the man I knew for like 20 minutes. I don't know if you got sort of a similar emotion of that, or did you approach him from a different sort of angle?
No, I didn't mind Jack's death, because basically the point in which Jack dies for Marianne, we actually get to see, because we see him as a spirit. And we see him send him off, and we see how that affects her. So we don't especially need to feel for Jack as a player. What we do see is how that has such a an effect on Marianne, and the delivery and the acting is really good. The writing is really good. It gets that across, and later on in the game, Jack is used for kind of emotional weight, actually used by the Maw as manipulation to provoke and distress Marianne, which was really interesting. I thought that could that could have been expanded on if some way the
Yeah.
Maw could have mimicked Jack, so we actually saw him instead of just sounding it as his voice. Because I don't know if it's completely obvious that it's doing that as Jack's voice if you haven't got subtitles on.
No, yeah, because like I don't know, when I was playing through it, like I get what you mean about them bringing Jack back at a later stage. I think it's at the stage where you're outside and you have to turn on the generator and kind of, I think it's to electrocute them all or something. You kind of see him, and it plays off that. It's a kind of, it's not even for a full 5 minutes. Like you just kind of follow it down, and then the Maw comes out with his classic one-liner, "It all ends in me," and then you kind of go pegging it again. But I don't know. I feel like Jack was underutilized, to be honest. Like I get that it was a good introduction to sort of the game's mechanics and what a medium is at the beginning, but kind of I don't know. Maybe it feels like to me it's like, I don't know. Maybe kind of not a throwaway character, because he definitely plays a role in certain elements, but it almost seems like a crutch character, if you get me. Like, it seems like they've just kind of inserted him in near the end of the game because they're like, oh no, we have this character that we haven't talked about since the beginning of the game. Just kind of stick him in a scene here. And then Jack isn't really referenced again after that. It's very much just all about Thomas, Marianne, Lily, and the Maw, which is fine. But it's like I maybe would have liked a little bit more out of it.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair. Although I will say, if we do get another game with Marianne, I do want it to happen after the events of this narrative. Although before, when she's learning her abilities, I don't see that narrative as interesting as now you've had this very personal story happen to her and how that's going to impact her going forward. But actually, getting to the point of the crux of what happens to Lily, I was originally thinking, are there two daughters? Is it just Marianne, and actually she's forgotten everything that happened to her, and the anger she's left behind is the Maw. Her sadness she's left behind is the entity Sadness, the ghost. Is it really just one daughter? And then we get the photo where there's two daughters. So I'm thinking, okay, so what's really going on here? Is Marianne the one that was trapped in the room? And then as we go on, it is revealed that it is just Lily. It is just Lily with the pact that she made to get you out of the fire, and this entity which just wants to run amok. I think, when you were saying the tagline of the Maw, "It all ends in me," I was thinking, yeah, he does repeat himself a lot. Let me wear your skin suit. It all ends in me. There could have been times where he had a really good dialogue with Marianne about Thomas. There could have been a whole scope for things where you could have got Troy Baker having this great delivery with the Maw that I feel they might have underused. And that's
because
go on.
Yeah, no, because I was just going to say, because I feel like when you're first introduced to the Maw, his dialogue is really strong. Like the introduction of him as you go through, what is it? You're in the back end of Thomas's office, and you kind of get introduced to him by then being transported to the spirit world. Like, he is presented in this really sort of like eerie setting, as an eerie enough character, but there's still a lot of intrigue as well. So like you've kind of got questions yourself. But again, it's never really expanded on until very late game.
Yeah, that's very true. Actually, it's quite an important question of what do you think happens at the end of the game?
Yeah, the question, does Marianne shoot herself or does she shoot Lily? I'm kind of on I think she shoots herself, to be honest. I think she's made that assumption, and the Maw kind of, like, at least to me, the Maw kind of gives away that it doesn't really matter whether Lily's alive or not, because he's gonna try and take over Marianne anyways. At least in my head, like, I don't know, it's strange, and I was very much at the end of the game. I was like, kicking myself. I was like, oh, why would they leave it on a cliffhanger? This is ridiculous. No, I need to know. But like, kind of thinking about it, like, there was really only kind of one option there. Like, she was never, like, Marianne was never really swayed in the final scene to, you know, shoot Lily. I don't know. What did you think?
I think you're absolutely right. I think Marianne, as what we see of her character, to remain true to her character, she would not shoot Lily. She would shoot herself before she would shoot Lily. I think that's made clear in her character. And that's, you know, props to the game that we can actually know a character well enough that we know her decision.
Mm-hmm.
But if she were to shoot Lily, what's she going to do to the Moor? How is she going to get rid of it? You know,
Yeah.
that question alone perplexes me. Is that, okay, we've been told that Marianne is strong enough to get rid of the Moor if she shoots Lily. Yeah, but what is she going to do?
Yeah.
So although for a sequel purpose, yes, I want Marianne to live. I want, you know, the medium part 2. I want to see Marianne struggling with her choice and the grief, and I want a dark, perhaps more horrific story where she goes somewhere else and, you know, there's combat involved. I absolutely want that game. But Marianne, as we know her, wouldn't have shot Lily, I don't think.
Which kind of it raises up another question. Then, if she did shoot herself, do you think there's some way that she survived?
Well, we know that Thomas has said that one cannot exist without the other. However, this constantly leads back to the question of, okay, so Thomas must have locked Spirit Thomas in the bunker, in the broken mirror. Now, if Thomas was the zombified looking figure, you know, drained by the entity, and the only way that he could have got that drained was if he let the Moor in, and the Moor could only allow that because Spirit Thomas wasn't there, so he was not an appropriate host. But then that raises questions of, okay, how was he living with the Moor previously? Yes, he made this room for Lily, but he was saying in the notes, you know, I can finally be on my own. I can finally hear quiet now. So, you know, there's a lot of questions here as to what happened to Thomas and exactly how the Moor and the spirits operate. Now, could they wrap this up in a DLC? Yes. And to be honest, that is what I would be expecting, and I hope that this game does well enough that they can do that. Because
yeah, for sure.
Viewing that post-credit scene, that feels like that's what they want to do.
Half of me kind of thinks, would they have been better off having a more definitive ending? Because, you know, like, they could well do it in a DLC, and I suppose that's a good option. It kind of negates the idea of, like, you know, like, I don't think with the plot they have at the moment, if it is, you know, Marianne, you know, shoots herself and then, you know, it's kind of taken on the lens of Thomas, if that is the case, and we don't know, that could easily change. I don't think there's enough material there to go for a second game over, unless they did some sort of prequel to it. I do think, though, that, like, you know, what am I trying to say here? I think they've got sufficient level to work with, but would the story have been more impactful for what it is had it just been a sole experience? Like, if they had wrapped up stuff at the end?
Not for me. And I'll tell you why. Because that ending is memorable. When you think of the medium, you're going to think of that ending. And for the players who really enjoy it, and I think I'm probably the target audience for this game as someone who just, you know, really enjoys story over gameplay, although that's not always true, but I really did connect with this game. It's left me hungry for more. It's not feeling like, I'll tell you what, the medium to me feels like a complete package. They don't need to do any more, but they have left me hungry for more.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've had such a positive reaction to this game that I have gone and bought Observer as well, and I'm going to try out Bloober Team's other games. So, you know, I am the targeted reaction that they wanted, probably.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm going to be watching them quite interestingly to see what they do with this, because I think they want people to remember it as a memorable and impactful end.
Yeah.
If they wrapped it up, that would be like, okay, that's a game that I'm never going to play again.
Yeah, that is a good point, yeah. Because it'll keep people thinking, and it is one of those endings as well that, even if you're, mildly invested in it, you'll be kind of like, oh, wait, what about this? And, oh my God, who was that at the end? And, so yeah, it does its job well in setting up for another game. I think in my head, I was just a bit surprised that they went for this sort of, not really cliffhanger ending, I think I'd describe it. I was surprised they kind of went for it, given the poor reception they had gotten for, Layers of Fear and Blair Witch Project. Because I thought, if it was me, and obviously I'm no game developer, Bloober Team don't obviously need my help, but if it was me and two games that kind of been lukewarm reception, to say the least, I would have been kind of thinking like, okay, well, let's get a good game out, and let's go out with maybe it's a positive attitude to go out with the assumption that you intend to make more games for that series as opposed to just a single game. But I know from my perspective, if it was the case with previous titles, I probably would have taken a bit more of a cautious approach and tried to wrap stuff up and then kind of work from there.
See, I haven't played Layers of Fear or Blair Witch. Have they left relatively open endings to those?
See, I'm gonna say really bad now for kind of saying this, but I actually haven't finished either of them because I didn't enjoy them enough to get through them.
Right.
But by no means though, like, because when I played them and I was kind of like, and I've said in the previous episode that these sort of games aren't really my style. I'm more into sort of, I would suppose, fast paced stuff. Not that I don't enjoy the odd, very narrative driven game, but I think there's a fine line you can draw with, being a narrative driven game or being a narrative driven movie experience with tacked on gameplay. And the Blair Witch Project, Layers of Fear, there's good elements to those. But the majority of the reception, I think, even if you look up their Metacritic scores or some of the reviews, and I know they're not a fantastic way of grading a game. I think the Metacritic score for the medium is around the mid-70s, and which sounds good in theory, until you realize that people who play games have a very narrow look of the gaming medium and won't accept anything below an 80. So the games like Blair Witch and all that, there was big hype around Blair Witch as well. It's a big property in its own right. And I remember it being revealed at E3 and being like, I am going to play this because I really like Blair Witch. And I was going to give it a go. And I was just a bit let down by it. But yeah, no, to answer your question, sorry, and I kind of went on a tangent there a little bit. To answer your question with regards to do they have open-ended, I honestly can't tell you.
Right, you bring up some good points. I mean, it's worth noting that GameSpot's review of this game is sitting at a 9.
Yeah.
And reviews do literally range from, between 6 to 9. Well, 6 to 8, I would say, is a fair review.
Mm-hmm.
And this game very much reminds me of... Did you play Tell Me Why last year?
No, but I know it was nominated for a Game Award, and it's on my list to look at.
Now, Tell Me Why was an episodic story-driven game by Don't Nod, and that came out, and it's all I could think about from the first time I played episode 1 to episode 3, the finale. I sat down with a drink, and I enjoyed each of those episodes thoroughly, and I love a good story. And when these story-driven games come to Game Pass, I'm like, oh, fantastic! I am going to be wrapped in a game for 3 days or however long it's releasing for, and then at the end I'm gonna go, I love that, can't wait for the next thing. So I'm absolutely invested in these games that come to Game Pass that are great stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're definitely I think, in fairness, these games, if you were to sort of like, they're a good bridge for people who aren't big into games, but are really big into sort of like, you know, movies, TV. I think this is a good introduction for people who want to get into games. Like this style of games, you know, not very heavy gameplay focused, more kind of based on the story. But they do introduce, you know, sort of core mechanics. Like I know, for example, like my dad or my sister, they don't play games at all. And, you know, trying to get them to move in a coherent fashion with the thumbsticks is, you know, difficult enough in itself. But you know, games like again, Layers of Fear, let's say that as an example. Well, that's a good one. Tell Me Why, as you mentioned. Games like, I suppose you could probably lump this in. This is the one that always gets talked about with story games. Life is Strange. Games like that, you know, are a good introduction for people who, even any Telltale game actually is a good introduction for someone wanting to make the jump from, say, TV or movies over to games. It's a good bridge, and then once you get in, you know, you play your like Celeste or your, I don't know, Undertale or whatever you're into.
You know, I've just realised that my OBS is not recording through my proper mic. That's annoying.
Oh, well, I mean, if you at least it's recorded. That's the main thing. Do you want to change it over now? And
yeah, let me just see if I can do that. That's annoying.
Mm-hmm. Was it recording through your mic for the previous one? Yeah.
Yeah, it's recorded all through my mic.
Okay.
Just not the snowball, which was the whole purchase. Have I been?
Fingers crossed.
No, I've been coming through like this on Discord, haven't I? So you won't notice a difference.
Yeah, no.
Oh, bugger. Oh well, I'll know for next time.
Yeah. No, it's good to get these sort of kinks things out of the way the first time.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get all those ironed out.
Yeah, I'll try and fix it up anyways in Audition, see what I can do.
Right, so anyway, Celeste.
Yeah, no, I was just kind of saying it's a good bridgeway for games.
Absolutely,
for people who are going from movies to games, yeah.
I think if you have a model for Game Pass, you definitely want like one of these games. You know, this is the game that you want on it. It's not too heavy. It's not too light. It's something that comes. You know, if you want regular content coming every fortnight, you want stuff that is going to get people talking and going to keep people coming back to see, oh, what's the next game?
Yeah, for sure. I think, God, what else is there to talk about in this game? There's a load of stuff boggling around in my mind that I kind of want to, like, that I know I'll remember later and be annoyed that I didn't talk about it.
Yes, go for it. Clear the airway. Yeah,
no, just I want to reiterate like how good everything sort of direction wise is in this game. Like I absolutely adore the art style, particularly the Spirit World. I think it's done so well. It kind of gives off this almost if you played, actually the one thing that comes to mind whenever I see it, if you've played the first Doom game, when you go to hell in that, it looks quite like that, just but with a different saturation.
Yes. Doom 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah, very very much so, like a demonic Mars hellish landscape.
And one other thing I want to talk about is when you first go to the resort and you go in the front door, the sort of like the mysterious nature surrounding, you know, the Neva massacre and, you know, what happened, which we later turn out was, you know, the mall. It's such a brilliant like build up of tension, and, you know, there's a really good ambience, like especially like, you know, when you go into the first foyer and that's where you first meet Sadness. Like I remember being like, when you go in and, you know, there's a big gated off area that you don't actually go to. I remember looking at it and I was like, oh, I'm not looking down that hallway, something's gonna jump out. Like it's too much. But it just introduces everything so well at the beginning, especially when you're in the hotel, and it gradually introduces things. Now again, there's stuff, and, you know, I don't know if you had this problem, but when you went to Thomas's office and you were trying to get into the secret room, obviously you go through the spirit first and kind of power it up through there. After that, though, I completely forgot I had in sight, and then I was like, what do I do now? Like, can I not walk through? Like, what's going on?
Right. I didn't have a problem with Thomas's office. I think that's largely based off the clock, isn't it?
Yeah, but then there's a bit, at the end where you have to go and open the bookcase. I just completely forgot I had insight, and you could move stuff around once you do that.
Yeah, see, I think my problem was I was still triggered from the beginning with the tie clip, so I was using insight on everything. What you need is that really traumatic experience where you've been in a room for 15 minutes and you've missed the out of body or the insight thing, and then you're looking for, and then you're remembering what happened when I was stuck last time. Oh yeah, so no, I didn't have too much of a problem, to be honest. One of your points when you talk about what was it? Yeah, the landscape's looking really good. There are, however, animations or little things which don't match the standard of the quality in the rest of the game. I'd probably quote the smoke from when Marianne is smoking as not being very well animated. If you run downstairs, she has a really kind of flop from shoulder to shoulder. It looks bizarre, like she's supposed to be walking down. L.A. Noire had a really good system when it came to steps, because he would take each step as he went along them. But the animation just it felt like I should be laughing every time that she ran down some steps, because it was hilarious. And the other one was with the bolt cutters, agent bolt cutters, which I loved playing the game. I found that joke really charming. But the actual sound the bolt cutters make, you expect them to make kind of a really metal and the chains rattling, and what you get is just kind of this snap, like a group of dancers clicking their fingers or something. I don't know. It was like, this isn't the sound this should be making. So as high quality everything is, there are these little blind spots in the game that I think if you just had a tester to tell you, that's not really how bolt cutters sound, it would have just made the whole experience finish off to a polish. But again, got to remind myself, AA studio, or double A game, I should say, small team, not expecting absolute polish, because let's face it, I've enjoyed this more than I probably would enjoy AAA games. So
yeah, but like it's interesting to bring that up, because I wanted to kind of mention as well, after the initial chase scene with the mall, as visually stunning as as visually stunning, but as sort of grotesque and gruesome he looks like, his character animations seem really scripted, to the point where it's like really janky, and particularly there's one mechanic you get later in the game, and it's where you hold your breath once he manifests inside the real world, but he's invisible. Like, I don't know if it was just me that was kind of a bit like, didn't know how to use it properly, but like there's no indication of like, when should you be holding your breath, like how long can Marianne hold her breath for, because I'm pretty sure I held down the hold breath button for a good minute at one stage, and she wasn't ever panting for breath.
Well,
it just
I was holding my breath every time I was near the mall. I did hold my breath until the screen went very dark, but then I released it, so I didn't see what happened. I do know that you eventually do die if you spend too long out of your body.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The Mole's animations, he does have these very routine tracks. He'll go the same route around the boxes, and you've just got to stealth past them. Luckily, unfortunately, there aren't too many stealth sections in the game, so you're not going to get too tired of them. I found, hiding the actual appearance of the Mole for most of the game, when you just glimpse the monster, that is so effective. And actually seeing the character model at the end, as effective as it is, I can't help but feel underwhelmed. I want more dirt and grit and details on that Mole. I want it to look hyper realistic, it looked like Escharum in the Halo Infinite trailers. I want more details.
Yeah. That's another thing, and this is kind of a pet peeve that I had with the game when I was playing. But when you go into the spirit world and you're kind of freeing souls of people around the hotel. So there was I think Bernard is the first one. It's like one of the kids.
Yeah.
And then you free this guy who I don't know if he's on like a council or something in that hotel. Nicholas something is his name. and it's kind of the process of finding out his name to free him is going into the boardroom, listening to a thing that says, "Oh, they put me across from such and such a guy," and then you check the chair across. And I was like, okay, fine, I can do that. But what really annoyed me was that, like, yes, I know the name, so I ran all the way back, and then I was like, oh no, you don't know his name. It was only then I realized you have to go all the way back, look at the script of people, click on the person he's sitting across from's name, then go and look at the chair again, and then go and check the list off and be like, oh yes, it's Nicholas, like I knew 5 minutes ago, but I didn't have the game scripting in my balance at that stage.
Yeah, I've heard multiple people complain about that particular instance where you get the guy's name, but the game hasn't clocked it yet, so you're going off before it. And that's something that in Return of the Obra Dinn, which is a really good detective game, you can actually input answers when you know something, so you don't have to worry about that. But in this game, it is very scripted. Marianne always says when she discovers something, when you've put something in the right place, she'll go, brilliant, that's it, done. And in the last puzzle with the water retention things, I know I hadn't done it right until she'd said something, so I kept changing it about. So there is a bit of that with this game, and I suppose that leads on to people saying, she's always saying the obvious, but actually that does play into the gameplay of, you are not smarter than Marianne. You figure out things when she says it, and that's part of the artifice of game developing, where yes, we as a player know more than the character, but they've decided to put this system in. And there are a lot of things in this game which they could have done better. And you're always thinking as a gamer, why didn't they expect me to be smarter?
Yeah.
But it depends on the developer what systems you're going to implement. And this does feel slightly retro in its choices.
Yeah, but I suppose it's also geared as well to new players, because as I said just earlier on, like, this is a good entry level game to give to someone. So I suppose they're kind of appealing to that audience as well. So they've got to make it as simplistic or as scripted and rudimentary as possible, which has its benefits for some people, but for people who've played games before and people who are coming to this, it kind of draws away from the experience.
Actually, there was something I wanted to ask you. In the end of the game where you're in the ship, or not ship, but you have to sort the water out, the water levels.
Yeah.
And you first see them all, and you hear them all repeatedly talking to you. Did you actually have to run away from them all, or did you see them all at any point coming after you or going round at the level at that point?
No, the only time I ever thought he was there was I kind of thought he was below me, but I never actually ran into him. And yeah, I get what you mean. Like, it was just strange.
That was disappointing, because you see him in the spirit world and you think, oh crap, he's here, I'm gonna have to watch out for him. There's a switch that you pull which can activate electricity. You think, okay, I'm running past this, I might have to activate this later if he's chasing after me, as a trap. And you're expecting, this is the final level, he's going to be around, I'm going to have to use stealth. And then actually I didn't encounter him once.
Yeah.
And I began by kind of sneaking round, and then I thought, oh, he's not here. So I just kind of ran round and did the puzzle. And that was slightly disappointing, because, it's the end of the game. I want the final conflict with the Maw.
Yeah, because I definitely I get what you mean by the electricity and pulling the lever, because as soon as I left that room I put it back up again. I was like, oh, he's gonna run through here, I'm gonna get him. But yeah, no, it's literally just, it's the most pointless obstacle as well, because it doesn't take any effort to kind of put the power in that. Well, you don't even need to put power in it. I think you just turn it off.
Yeah it definitely made me feel like, oh, if I'm on the right end of this, I can use this against him later. I'm thinking ahead of the game, I'm trying to be a smart player, and the game just hasn't put in those systems to reward me for that thinking. So, but actually saying that, I thought the end bit where you have to trick him by going out of your body and getting past him, I thought that was excellent. I thought that was really rewarding. I mean, obviously it was a simple answer, but it was always the case of, when I come to something, oh, I know how to use out of body, because it's always the thing I go, oh, am I not checking for this? So Although it was a simple answer, that felt good. That felt like you were, as the player, were tricking the more. And I always hate when the decision is taken away from you. And yes, I'm disappointed that at the end you don't get to stand there with the gun and make a decision, even if it's locked onto Lily's head and you have to pull the trigger. I'm disappointed that as a player that decision is taken away.
Yeah.
But
oh yeah,
you know,
I think there's loads more we could talk about, but we're getting up to the past 50-minute mark now. I think we might want to call it.
yes, I think we've touched all bases.
Is there anything else you want to add just before we finish up?
No, I will say I really enjoyed this game. I'm really looking forward to see if they carry on this franchise in any way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's it anyways. Pretty much, if any of you guys have any thoughts on the game, because if you're listening to this, you probably will have played it, please leave them down in the comments below, or you can contact through any of the social media links or the email, which is also linked below. Next week, we'll be talking about Control, as mentioned in the previous episode. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel or following the podcast on all other platforms. Thanks for listening.